First contact in the medical bay. Dr. Sarah Chen had seen countless patients during her tenure at Deep Space Medical Station Artemis 7, but none quite like this. The creature lying unconscious on her examination table had skin that shimmered like liquid mercury, making it almost painful to look at directly under the harsh medical bay lights. Its chest rose and fell in an irregular rhythm that defied everything she knew about xenobiology. Patient is approximately 2 meters in length, humanoid in basic structure, but with significant anatomical variations. She recorded into her medical log, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. Brought in by the merchant vessel Star Wanderer after being found adrift in an escape pod near the Carina Nebula. Sarah reached for her scanner, but her hand froze midway as the being's skin rippled like disturbed water. The monitoring equipment began screaming warnings, blood pressure dropping, heart rate erratic, oxygen levels plummeting. Or at least, that's what they would mean for a human patient. For this creature, she had no baseline. Computer, run full spectrum analysis. Search database for any matching species markers. Her fingers flew over the holographic controls, initiating emergency protocols she'd never had to use outside of simulations. No match found in current xenobiological database, the computer replied in its maddeningly calm voice. Warning. Patient's cellular structure showing signs of rapid degradation. Sarah swore under her breath. She was the only doctor currently on duty in this sector of the station, and she had a dying, unknown alien in her care. The diplomatic implications alone were staggering, but right now all she could think about was saving a life. Any life. Begin recording emergency medical intervention, she commanded, pulling up her sleeve. Patient experiencing severe cellular breakdown of unknown origin. Standard treatments ineffective. Attempting experimental procedure. What she was about to do violated at least 6 interstellar medical protocols, but she didn't see any other choice. Sarah had discovered something unique about her own physiology years ago. Her blood had extraordinary regenerative properties. She kept it secret, fearing she'd become nothing more than a lab specimen if anyone found out. But now, she pressed the hypo spray to her arm, drawing a vial of her own blood. The silvery skin of her patient had taken on a dull, matte appearance that she instinctively knew meant death was approaching. Without allowing herself to second-guess, she loaded the vial into an injection system, administering 10 kYeah, specialized biological material. She said carefully for the record. Time is 3:47 station standard. The moment her blood entered the alien system, everything changed. The silvery skin began to pulse with an inner light, and the monitoring equipment registered a surge of activity across all channels. Sarah watched in fascination as her blood, visible through the creature's translucent skin, spread through its circulatory system like threads of golden light. Then the screaming started. Not vocal screaming. The being had no apparent mouth, but a psychic cry so powerful it brought Sarah to her knees. Images flooded her mind. A beautiful world with 3 moons, a civilization of beings like her patient living in cities that seemed to be made of living crystal. And then, darkness, disease, death, an escape pod launching as the cities crumbled. Help us, a voice echoed in her mind. You, help us. Sarah pulled herself up using the edge of the examination table, her hands shaking. The alien skin had stabilized, returning to its mirror-like sheen, but now showed subtle swirls of gold where her blood had integrated with its system. Patient stabilized. She managed to say for the log, though her voice cracked, showing signs of unprecedented cellular regeneration. And she hesitated, knowing how this would sound. Possible psychic contact. The being's eyes opened, all 4 of them, arranged in a diamond pattern on its face. They were deep purple with gold flecks that hadn't been there before, and they fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her breath catch. I am Zixtal. The voice spoke in her mind, clearer now. You have done something impossible. You have changed me, changed everything. Sarah glanced at her arm where she'd drawn her blood, then back at her patient. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen," she replied, unsure if speaking aloud was necessary, but doing it anyway. "And I think we have a lot to talk about." The next few hours were a blur of medical tests, attempted communication, and growing wonder. Sarah learned that Zixtal's species, the Lumini, had been devastated by a plague that caused their cellular structure to break down. They had sent out hundreds of escape pods, hoping to find help among the stars. Most had perished, but somehow, human blood, her blood specifically, had not only halted the degradation, but had begun to reverse it. "Your kind is different," Zixtal communicated while Sarah examined the readings. "Your cells, they adapt, change, heal in ways we cannot comprehend. Human beings have always been remarkably resilient," Sarah replied, studying the way her patient's tissue samples were already showing signs of developing new cellular protection mechanisms. "But this is beyond anything I've seen before." As she worked, Sarah couldn't help but think about the implications. Her blood hadn't just healed Zixtal, it had created a connection between them. She could feel emotions that weren't her own: gratitude, hope, and an urgent need to help others. The fate of an entire species might depend on understanding what had happened in this medical bay. "There are more of your people out there?" she asked, already knowing the answer from the shared memories. "Many pods," Zixtal confirmed. "Many dying. But now, hope." Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. She knew what she had to do, even if it meant revealing her secret to the universe. "Then we'd better get to work. Computer, open channel to Station Command. Medical Emergency Protocol 117. And get me everything we have on interspecies blood compatibility." As she waited for the connection, Zixtal's gratitude washed over her like a warm wave. "You risk much to help us." "That's what doctors do," Sarah replied with a small smile. "Besides, I have a feeling this is just the beginning of something much bigger than both of us." The communication console chimed, and Sarah straightened her uniform. In the next few minutes, she would change everything. Medical science, interspecies relations, perhaps the very future of human-alien interaction. But right now, she was simply a doctor with a patient who needed help. And sometimes, that was enough to start a revolution. The Neuralink. Sleep had become a strange concept for Dr. Sarah Chen since treating her first Lumini patient. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind filled with images that weren't her own: crystalline cities gleaming under triple moons, medical knowledge written in patterns of light, and an overwhelming sense of loss that made her wake up gasping. "The neural connection is strengthening," Zixtal observed as Sarah entered the quarantine lab, now converted into a dedicated research space. The Lumini's silver skin rippled with golden patterns, a permanent reminder of how Sarah's blood had changed them. "You're receiving more than just surface thoughts now." Sarah rubbed her temples, checking the latest test results on her holoscreen. "Is this normal for your species? This level of mental connection?" "No." Zixtal's thoughts carried a hint of fascination. "We are telepathic among ourselves. But this is deeper. Your blood didn't just heal me, Dr. Chen. It's creating something new." The lab was filled with complex equipment hastily assembled after Sarah's report to Station Command. Initially, they'd wanted to evacuate her and Zixtal to a more secure facility, but the discovery of 3 more Lumini escape pods in nearby sectors had changed their plans. Artemis 7 was now the front line in preventing an interstellar pandemic. "These cellular changes are remarkable," Sarah murmured, examining the microscopic images. Her blood cells had not only integrated with Zixtal's system, but had triggered mutations that seemed to be rewriting their genetic code. "Your immune system is actually incorporating human defense mechanisms." A wave of excitement that wasn't her own washed over her. "And through our connection, I'm gaining access to generations of human medical knowledge stored in your cellular memory. Knowledge we never conceived of." Sarah was about to respond when an alarm blared through the station. "Emergency medical team to Docking Bay 3, the computer announced. New Lumini arrival showing critical degradation. Go, Zixtal urged, sensing her hesitation. I'll continue analyzing the data here. Sarah grabbed her medical kit and ran. The corridors of Artemis 7 were busier now, filled with emergency response teams and researchers drawn by the unprecedented situation. She reached the docking bay just as the rescue team was bringing in the stasis pod. The Lumini inside was barely alive, their silver skin dulled to a sickly gray. Sarah felt Zixtal's consciousness brush against hers, sharing crucial information about their biology that would have taken years to learn otherwise. Begin emergency transfusion protocol, she ordered, pressing her hand against the biometric scanner that would allow access to her secured blood samples. They'd learned that synthetic replications didn't work. Something about her specific genetic makeup was key to the treatment. As she worked to save another life, Sarah's mind was flooded with new information. Through her deepening connection with Zixtal, she was beginning to understand why human blood, her blood in particular, had such a dramatic effect on the Lumini. Their cellular structure is like living crystal, she explained to the medical team as they monitored the transfusion. Rigid, perfect, but unable to adapt. The plague exploits that inflexibility. But human cells are chaos incarnate, came Zixtal's thought, tinged with admiration. Your species evolved to be adaptable above all else. Your cells don't just fight infection. They learn, change. Remember, it's beautiful. The Lumini in the stasis pod began to show the same golden patterns as Zixtal as Sarah's blood took effect. But this time, she was prepared for the psychic backlash. Through her link with Zixtal, she helped guide the confused alien consciousness through the transformation. Hours later, back in the lab, Sarah studied the latest results with growing excitement. The genetic changes are consistent between both patients now. We're developing a protocol that could be replicated. But the neural link remains unique to us, Zixtal noted. Perhaps because you were the first, perhaps because of your particular genetic makeup. The others can communicate with me, but they don't share the same depth of connection. Sarah nodded, trying to ignore the headache building behind her eyes. The constant presence of another consciousness in her mind was taking its toll, but there was too much at stake to rest. Dr. Chen. The station's AI interrupted. Priority communication from Earth Medical Command. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a panel of serious-faced officials. Doctor, we've reviewed your latest findings. The lead administrator began without preamble. The implications are concerning. The level of genetic transfer between species, the neural link you've developed. This goes beyond all established protocols. Sarah felt Zixtal's anxiety spike through their connection. With respect, sir, we're dealing with an unprecedented situation. The protocols weren't written for this. Precisely our concern. We're detecting changes in your own genetic structure, Doctor. Subtle, but progressing. This link you've developed, it's not just affecting the Lumini. It's affecting you. Sarah's hand unconsciously went to her arm, where she'd drawn the first blood sample. Her skin seemed to shimmer slightly in the lad's harsh light. Or was that her imagination? The changes are beneficial. Zixtal projected strongly enough that Sarah wondered if the committee could somehow sense them. We are learning from each other. Evolving. That's exactly what we're afraid of, the administrator replied grimly. Dr. Chen, you're to cease all further transfusions immediately. A containment team is en route to the station. This situation requires closer supervision. As the transmission ended, Sarah stood in silence, her mind racing. Through their link, she and Zixtal shared the same thought. They were running out of time. The Lumini were still dying across the sector, and now Earth Command wanted to shut them down. They're afraid, Zixtal observed. Afraid of change, of evolution, of what we might become together. Sarah looked at her reflection in a nearby screen, noting the subtle golden flecks that had appeared in her irises. Maybe they should be, she whispered. But that doesn't mean we're wrong. She straightened her shoulders, decision made. Computer, Begin recording. Emergency protocol override. Authorization, Chen Alpha 9. We're continuing the treatment program, and we're going to need a bigger lab. The revolution she'd started in that first emergency treatment was gaining momentum. Now she just had to survive long enough to see it through. Pandemic protocol. The quarantine alert echoed through Artemis 7's corridors, red warning lights casting ominous shadows across walls that had begun to develop an odd crystalline sheen where Sarah's transformed blood samples had been processed. Station security teams hustled through the halls in sealed environmental suits, their boots clanking against metal floors. Quarantine protocol initiated. The station AI announced. All non-essential personnel are confined to quarters. Medical bay access restricted to authorized personnel only. Sarah stood at the observation window of her expanded lab, watching as another ship carrying refugee Lumini approached the station. Through her neural link with Zixtal, she could already sense the desperation of those aboard. More dying, more in need of help. Earth Command vessel approaching. The AI updated. ETA 20 minutes. They fear what they don't understand, Zixtal observed, their silvery form reflecting the warning lights in hypnotic patterns. The golden swirls in their skin had spread further, creating complex designs that pulsed in sync with their thoughts. But they cannot stop what has already begun. Sarah touched the window, her reflection showing how much she'd changed in just a few weeks. Her eyes now held distinct golden flecks, and her skin had taken on a subtle luminescence that was impossible to hide. The genetic changes weren't just superficial. She could feel herself becoming something new, something that existed between human and Lumini. Dr. Chen. Dr. Marcus Reed, her former mentor and now Earth Command's chief medical officer, burst into the lab. His environmental suit seemed almost comically paranoid, given what they'd learned about the actual transmission vectors of the Lumini plague. "What have you done to my station?" "Your station." Sarah turned, noting how Marcus took an involuntary step back at her altered appearance. "Last I checked, Artemis 7 was an international facility dedicated to saving lives. That's exactly what we're doing here. You're playing God with human genetics." Marcus gestured at the crystalline growths spreading across the lab walls. "Look at this place. Look at yourself. The containment team is here to shut this down before it gets any further out of hand." Sarah felt a ripple of amusement from Zixtal. The Lumini had a different perspective on genetic modification. To them, adaptation was survival. "These changes aren't random, Marcus. They're purposeful. We're evolving to meet a crisis, just as humanity has always done." "Evolution takes thousands of years, not weeks," Marcus protested, but Sarah could see the scientist in him was fascinated despite his fear. "The genetic drift we're seeing in your cells, it should be impossible." "Impossible is just a word for something we don't understand yet," Sarah replied, moving to her workstation where holographic displays showed the latest genetic analysis. "Look at this data, Marcus. Really look at it. The Lumini plague isn't just a disease, it's an evolutionary dead end. Their perfect, crystalline biology made them vulnerable to their own rigidity. But human adaptability is providing a bridge to a new form," Zixtal finished, causing Marcus to jump as their thoughts projected into his mind. "Through Sarah, we are learning to change. Through us, she is learning to transcend." Before Marcus could respond, alarms blared again. "Warning," the AI announced. "Unauthorized access detected in medical storage. Security breach in progress." Sarah's enhanced senses immediately picked up what was happening. Through her connection to the station, another unexpected development of her transformation, she could feel the containment team moving through the lower levels, systematically destroying her blood samples and research data. "They're not here to study this, are they?" she asked Marcus, though she already knew the answer. "They're here to erase it, to pretend none of this ever happened." Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. The potential for panic if this gets out, for misuse. The committee decided it was too dangerous. Too dangerous. Sarah laughed, and the sound had an otherworldly quality that made Marcus flinch. What's dangerous is denying our potential for growth, for change. She turned to Zixtal. How many pods are approaching now? 17 within sensor range, Zixtal replied. All carrying survivors, all needing help. Sarah made her decision. Through her neural link with Zixtal and her growing connection to the station itself, she began implementing commands that would lock down crucial systems. Marcus, I'm going to give you a choice. Stay and help us save lives, or leave now before I seal the lab. Sarah, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm choosing to help people who are dying. I'm choosing to embrace change instead of fear it. Her eyes, now more gold than brown, met his. What are you choosing? The containment team was getting closer. She could feel them moving through the station like dark spots in her awareness. But she could also feel something else. The approaching Lumini vessels, carrying not just refugees but hope for a new kind of future. Last chance, Marcus, she said softly. Help us or leave. But you're not stopping this. Marcus looked between Sarah and Zixtal, then at the crystalline pattern slowly spreading across the lab walls. Beautiful, alien, yet somehow natural. Finally, he reached up and unsealed his environmental suit. The committee's going to shut us down, he warned, even as he moved to a workstation. Sarah smiled, and in that smile was the future of two species becoming something new. Let them try. Through her connection to both Zixtal and the station, she began implementing the true quarantine protocol, not to keep infection in, but to keep interference out. As the lab sealed itself off from the rest of the station, she could feel the approaching ships, each carrying more potential for transformation, for evolution, for hope. Now, she said, her voice carrying echoes of both human determination and Lumini wisdom, let's get back to work. We have lives to save. The cure within. The sealed medical bay of Artemis 7 had become something entirely new. Crystalline formations pulsed with bioluminescent light, creating patterns that matched the neural frequencies of its occupants. Sarah Chen stood at the center of it all, her transformed body now a bridge between two species and possibly humanity's next evolutionary leap. Earth command vessels are taking up tactical positions around the station. Marcus reported, his eyes fixed on the security feeds. He had adapted surprisingly well to their situation over the past 48 hours, his scientific curiosity overwhelming his initial fear. They're prepping for a forced entry. Sarah barely heard him. Through her enhanced connection to both the station and the Lumini, she was focused on something far more important. In her mind's eye, she could see a complex dance of molecules and genes, human adaptability merging with Lumini crystalline perfection to create something entirely new. We're close, she murmured, her voice carrying harmonic overtones that made the crystal growths resonate. The final transformation. It's not just about changing them. It's about changing together. Zixtal moved beside her, their silvery form now traced with such complex golden patterns that they seemed to tell the story of evolution itself. The others sense it too. We are reaching a critical moment. The others were the 37 Lumini survivors now housed in the transformed medical bay, each at various stages of the treatment process. Through Sarah's evolved abilities, they were all connected in a vast neural network that amplified their collective understanding. Their ships are powering weapons, Marcus warned, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. Sarah's consciousness expanded, touching each mind in their makeshift sanctuary. She could feel the Lumini plague trying to break down their cellular structures, but she could also feel something else. The way her modified blood was teaching their bodies to adapt, to change, to survive. And in return, their crystalline nature was teaching her human cells how to achieve a perfection that still allowed for growth. Dr. Chen, the Station A's voice, had taken on an unusual quality since the transformation began. External sensors detect energy buildup consistent with breaching charges. Estimated time to forced entry, 10 minutes. They still don't understand, Sarah said, opening eyes that now swirled with gold and silver. They think they can stop evolution with weapons. She turned to Marcus. "Show me the latest genetic scans." The holographic display sprang to life, showing the incredible changes taking place at the cellular level. Human DNA spiraling in new patterns, Lumini crystalline structures learning to flex and adapt, both species moving toward something that had never existed before. "Look at this pattern here." Marcus pointed to a particular sequence, his excitement overtaking his concern about the imminent invasion. "The way your modified genes are integrating with their structure. It's like watching millions of years of evolution happening in real time." "Not evolution," Sarah corrected, understanding flowing through her enhanced consciousness. "Synthesis. We're not just adapting to survive. We're becoming what both species were always meant to be." A shudder ran through the station as the first breaching charge detonated against the outer doors. But Sarah remained calm. Through her connection to the station's systems, she could feel the crystalline growths reinforcing the structure, growing stronger with each impact. "Sarah," Marcus's voice was urgent now. "Whatever you're going to do, it needs to happen soon. Those doors won't hold forever, even with the modifications." She nodded, turning to where the most critical Lumini patients lay in their transformed medical pods. Their silver skin had dulled to a dangerous gray, the golden patterns from her blood treatment flickering weakly. They were running out of time. "Zixtal," she called, though speaking aloud was hardly necessary anymore. "Are you ready?" The first Lumini she had saved moved to her side, their forms now so similar that they seemed like mirrors of each other. "We are all ready. The network is complete." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the connection to every being in the medical bay strengthen. What they were about to attempt went beyond mere medicine, or even evolution. It was a complete reimagining of what life could be. "Begin final synthesis," she commanded, and every crystalline surface in the bay began to pulse with light. Through their shared neural network, Sarah began to channel the complete genetic knowledge of both species. Her consciousness expanded to encompass every cell, every molecule, every quantum possibility. She could feel the Lumini plague trying to resist, trying to maintain its destructive hold on its victims. But it was no match for the combined power of human adaptability and Lumini perfection. The light grew blinding, and the air itself seemed to crystallize. Marcus shielded his eyes, but he could still see the extraordinary transformation taking place. Sarah and Zixtal had become beings of pure energy and crystalline light, their combined form radiating waves of genetic information that washed over every Lumini in the bay. Another explosion rocked the station, but it seemed insignificant compared to the evolution happening within. The dying Lumini began to change, their dull gray skin blazing with new life as their very cellular structure was rewritten. But they weren't just being cured, they were becoming something more, something that carried the best of both species. As the light began to fade, Sarah's consciousness returned to a more focused state. She looked down at her hands, now shimmering with an inner light that merged seamlessly with her human form. Around her, the transformed Lumini were rising from their pods, each of them changed but still uniquely themselves. "It worked," Marcus breathed, checking the medical readings. "The plague. It's not just gone. Their entire genetic structure has been stabilized at a higher level. They can't get sick like that ever again." "No," Sarah agreed, feeling the truth of it through their shared connection. "We've become something new, something that can adapt without losing its essence, something that can evolve without fear." The final breaching charge detonated, and the doors to Medical Bay began to give way. But Sarah wasn't worried anymore. What was about to enter wasn't a threat. It was an opportunity to share their gift with a universe that desperately needed to learn how to change. Evolution's gift. When the Earth Command Strike Team finally breached the Medical Bay doors, they found themselves stepping into a world that defied their understanding. The crystalline growths that had concerned them so much now pulsed with life and purpose, creating an environment that was neither fully human nor Lumini, but something gloriously new. Admiral Helena Chen lowered her weapon slowly, staring at the transformed woman before her. Sarah, she whispered, recognition warring with disbelief. Little sister, what have you done? Sarah stood calmly at the center of the bay, her form radiating a subtle light that seemed to bend reality around her. The golden patterns in her skin matched those of the lumini gathered behind her, creating a visual harmony that spoke of deeper connections. What I had to do, Sarah replied, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystalline walls sing. What we all had to do to survive, to evolve. Through their neural network, she could feel the strike team's mix of fear and awe. More importantly, she could feel their potential, the same potential that existed in all human beings to become something more than they were. The committee wants this contained, Helena said, though she had yet to raise her weapon again. They're talking about quarantine, sterilization. They're afraid this could spread. They're right to be afraid. Marcus stepped forward, his scientific enthusiasm overwhelming his caution. But not of contamination. What's happening here? It's going to change everything we thought we knew about human potential. Sarah moved closer to her sister, noting how the strike team tensed. But she could sense no real hostility from them, only confusion and wonder. Look at what we've achieved, Helena. The lumini were dying, trapped by their own genetic perfection. Humanity has always been messy, chaotic, but capable of infinite adaptation. Together, we've become something that takes the best of both. She gestured, and the air itself seemed to crystallize, forming a holographic display of cellular structures more complex and beautiful than anything Earth scientists had ever seen. We're not losing our humanity. We're expanding it, growing into what we could always have been. Helena studied the display, her tactical training warring with the scientist she had once been before joining Earth Command. The genetic changes. They're stable. More than stable, Zixtol's thoughts projected clearly to everyone present. They're self-directing. Each individual's transformation is unique to them, guided by their own genetic potential. It's not a disease to be contained, Sarah added, reaching out to touch her sister's hand. It's a gift, a choice. The moment their skin made contact, Helena gasped. Through Sarah's evolved abilities, she could share a glimpse of what they had become, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. The vast neural network that connected human ingenuity with lumini wisdom, the potential for growth and change that existed in every cell. The committee won't accept this, Helena said finally, but Sarah could feel her conviction wavering. They'll say it's too dangerous, too unpredictable. Then let them come and see for themselves, Sarah replied. Let them feel what we felt, understand what we've understood. She turned to address the entire strike team. Everyone who enters this bay has a choice. You can leave unchanged, and we won't stop you, or you can stay and become part of humanity's next step forward. Through their shared connection, the transformed lumini projected images of their homeworld, not as it had been, but as it could be. Cities of living crystal that grew and adapted with their inhabitants, technology that merged seamlessly with biology, a civilization that had transcended the boundaries between species. We're sending out a call, Sarah explained, feeling more ships approaching the station. Not just lumini escape pods now, but vessels from other species who had sensed the change beginning here. Anyone who wants to evolve, to grow, to become more than they are while still remaining true to themselves. They'll find their way here. Helena looked around the transformed medical bay, at the humans and lumini working together in perfect harmony, at the beauty that had emerged from what her superiors had feared would be a catastrophe. Finally, she reached up and removed her tactical helmet. The committee's going to want a full report, she said, a slight smile playing at her lips. I suppose I should stay and gather proper scientific data. Sarah embraced her sister, feeling Helena's potential already beginning to stir. Around them, other members of the strike team were making their own choices, some leaving, many staying, all understanding that this moment would be remembered as a turning point in human history. What happens now? Marcus asked, already documenting the changes in those who had chosen to stay. Sarah looked out at the stars through the medical bay's viewport, feeling the approach of more ships, more seekers, more potential for change. The crystalline growths had spread throughout Artemis 7, transforming it into humanity's first adaptive station, a living monument to what was possible when fear gave way to hope. Now, she said, her voice carrying the wisdom of 2 species and the promise of many more to come, we grow, we learn, we evolve, not just as individuals or even as species, but as a galaxy coming to understand that change isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. The transformed medical bay pulsed with light, a beacon in the darkness of space, calling to all those who dreamed of becoming more than they were. And in that light, humanity's next chapter was already being written, one evolved cell at a time. High above the station, the first ships of the Galactic Evolution Council moved into position, not to contain or destroy, but to protect this new beginning. Through her expanded consciousness, Sarah could feel their crews making their own choices, their own steps toward transformation. The gift that had started with a desperate attempt to save a dying alien had become something far more profound. A bridge between what was and what could be, between the known and the possible, between the present and a future limited only by imagination and courage. And as Artemis 7 continued its orbit, now shimmering with crystalline light visible from distant stars, Sarah Chen smiled. The universe, she knew, would never be the same again. And that was exactly as it should be.